The day began like any other, yet beneath the ordinary rhythm of the morning, something extraordinary was waiting to unfold. Maya, a hard-working black woman in her early 30s, carried herself with the quiet strength of someone who had fought battles that few could see. Her life was built on routine. Wake early, prepare for work, and catch the 7:30 train that would carry her into the city where she worked as an assistant in a bustling law firm. She had dreams much larger than her present position. Maya wanted to become a lawyer herself, to stand in courtrooms and defend those whose voices were ignored. But the world had not made her path easy. She had grown up in a working-class neighborhood, raised by a single mother who had taught her resilience, faith, and compassion. Still, society had often reminded her that being both black and a woman meant she would have to work twice as hard for half the recognition. This morning, Maya hurried through the station, her bag slung over her shoulder, her heart racing as the announcement of a train echoed across the loudspeakers. Missing this train would mean being late for an important meeting. Her boss had warned her already that punctuality was everything. But as she rushed through the crowded platform, something caught her eye that made her slow her steps. Near the far end of the station, an old man struggled with his cane. His wrinkled hands trembled as he tried to lift a heavy bag onto the bench. People streamed past him, heads down, absorbed in their phones, unwilling to notice his quiet struggle. Maya's chest tightened. She could still make the train if she turned away, but something in her heart rooted her to the spot. The voice of her mother echoed in her mind. "Child, never walk past someone in need. Kindness costs nothing, but its value is greater than gold." She hesitated, her eyes darting to the train doors still open in the distance. She could almost feel the cool air of the compartment and the relief of sliding into her seat on time. Then she looked back at the man, who had dropped his bag, his shoulders sagging under the weight not just of luggage but of years. In that moment, Maya made a decision. She turned away from her train. "So, let me help you with that," she said gently, stepping toward him. The old man looked up, his tired eyes searching her face. "Oh, I don't want to trouble you. You'll miss your train." Maya smiled softly. "Trains come and go, but you look like you could use a hand." With practiced strength, she lifted his bag onto the bench and steadied his arm as he lowered himself onto the seat. The man let out a shaky breath, gratitude softening his lined face. "Bless you, child. People passed me by like I was invisible. But you stopped." Maya shrugged lightly, though her heart warmed. "You're not invisible. None of us are." As she said the words, she realized how deeply she meant them. Too many times she herself had felt unseen in rooms where decisions were made, her ideas ignored, her presence tolerated but not celebrated. Helping this man was more than kindness. It was a reflection of her own struggle to be acknowledged. By the time she looked up again, her train was gone. The platform had cleared, leaving only the sound of its departure echoing through the station. Maya sighed, a flicker of worry crossing her face. She would have to explain her lateness yet again, and she knew her boss would not be pleased. But when she looked back at the man, who smiled at her as if she had just given him the world, she felt no regret. They sat for a moment in silence, strangers sharing a quiet bond. Then the old man spoke, his voice soft but steady. "What's your name, child?" "Maya," she replied. "Well, Maya, sometimes a detour's life gives us lead to roads we never imagined. Don't be afraid of a missed train. You might just be on the right track." The words lingered in her heart long after the conversation ended. She didn't know yet that this single act of kindness, this small choice to miss a train, was about to change everything. Maya finally boarded the next train, 20 minutes late. As the doors closed behind her, she pulled out her phone and stared at the blinking cursor of a text she had typed and deleted 3 times. "I'm running late." She knew her boss, Mr. Kendall, would not take it lightly. In the competitive world of corporate law, appearances mattered almost as much as results, and Maya was already walking on thin ice. She sighed, slipping the phone back into her bag. She had made her choice. Her mind wandered back to the old man's words. "Don't be afraid of a missed train. You might just be on the right track." The sentence rang like a riddle in her mind. She wondered if she would ever understand what he truly meant. By the time she arrived at the office, the glass and steel building towered above her, cold and unwelcoming. She hurried through the revolving doors, clutching her bag tightly, and rushed toward the elevators. The familiar stays of co-workers trailed her. Some offered polite nods, but most carried that same look she had grown accustomed to, half curiosity, half judgment. A young black woman working in a prestigious law firm was rare enough, but Maya's quiet determination made her stand out in ways that unsettled those who believed success belonged to others. When she stepped into Mr. Kendall's office, he didn't even glance up from the stack of papers on his desk. "You're late again." His voice was clipped, each word sharp like the click of his pen. Maya swallowed. "Yes, sir. I apologize. No excuses," he interrupted. "If you want a future here, you'll need to learn discipline. Opportunities are not handed out. They are owned." The sting of his words cut deeper than she let show. Discipline? She thought of the years she had worked multiple jobs while studying at night, the sacrifices her mother had made to keep food on the table, and the resilience it took to push past barriers others never had to face. Still, she lowered her head and quietly replied, "Yes, sir." The rest of the day dragged on, each hour heavy with tasks piled higher than her desk. Yet through it all, Maya's mind kept drifting back to the old man. Something about his eyes, tired but wise, had stayed with her. She wondered if he had made it safely home, if anyone else had stopped to help him. That evening, as she left the office, the city streets buzzed with the chaos of rush hour. She was exhausted, weighed down not just by the day's work but by the subtle slights and dismissals that had become all too familiar. People cutting her off mid-sentence in meetings. Credit for her ideas being handed to someone else. The constant uphill climb of proving she belonged in spaces that were not built for her. As she descended into the subway station, she froze. There, sitting on a bench, was the same old man. He looked as if he had been waiting. When his eyes met Hayes, a faint smile spread across his face. "Ah, Maya," he said warmly, as if greeting an old friend. "I was hoping I'd see you again." She blinked in surprise. "You remember my name?" "Of course," he replied. "Names are important. They carry stories, legacies." He patted the spot beside him. "Sit." Though confused, Maya Saturday. Something about his presence was comforting, like sitting near a fire on a cold night. "I never got to tell you mine," he said, extending his hand. "Walter." "Nice to meet you, Walter," Maya replied, shaking his hand gently. His grip was firm, despite the frailty of his frame. Walter studied her for a moment, his gaze almost penetrating. "You remind me of someone. My daughter. Strong, determined, but always carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders." Maya's throat tightened. "She sounds like a remarkable woman." "She was," he said softly, eyes distant for a moment. "Life wasn't easy for her either, but she never stopped fighting for what was right." They sat in silence, the noise of trains rushing past them. Then Walter leaned closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Do you believe in fate, Maya?" She hesitated. "I don't know. I believe in hard work. I believe in doing what's right." He nodded slowly. Sometimes, doing what's right is exactly what leads us to fate. Before Maya could ask what he meant, Walter reached into his worn coat pocket and pulled out a folded envelope. He placed it gently into her hands. "Take this," he said firmly. Her brow furrowed. "What is it?" "An opportunity," Walter replied. "Something you've earned, even if the world tells you otherwise. Don't open it yet. Not here. But when the time is right, you'll understand." Maya looked at the envelope, confusion mixing with curiosity. "Why me?" Walter's eyes softened. "Because you stopped, because you saw me when no one else did. Sometimes the smallest act of kindness opens the biggest doors." Her chest tightened, emotion welling up. She wanted to ask more questions, but when she looked up, Walter was already rising slowly to his feet, cane in hand. "We'll see each other again," he said with quiet certainty, and before she could respond, he disappeared into the crowd. That night, lying awake in her small apartment, Maya stared at the envelope on her bedside table. She didn't dare open it yet. Instead, she closed her eyes and whispered a silent prayer of thanks, for her mother, for the strength that had carried her this far, and for the mysterious old man whose presence stirred something deep inside her. What Maya didn't know was that this encounter, the second missed train, was about to change the course of her entire life. The next morning, Maya woke with the envelope still on her nightstand. She had barely slept, tossing and turning with questions. What could possibly be inside? Why would a stranger entrust her with something so mysterious? She resisted the urge to open it immediately, remembering Walter's words. Not yet. Not here. When the time is right. Her day unfolded as usual, rushing to the train station, weaving through the crowd, drowning in the endless tide of office work. But everything felt different. It was as if a current beneath her ordinary life had shifted, pulling her towards something greater. At lunch, she sat alone in the crowded cafeteria, watching as colleagues clustered in groups, laughing and whispering. A familiar pang struck her chest, the sting of exclusion. She was present but never truly included. She stirred her coffee absent-mindedly, her thoughts circling back to Walter. His words, his presence, the strange envelope. It all lingered like a puzzle waiting to be solved. That evening, back at her apartment, she finally gave in. With trembling fingers, she broke the seal of the envelope. Inside was a single letter, handwritten in careful strokes. She unfolded the page and began to read. Maya, if you are reading this, then you have already shown the courage to choose kindness over convenience. That alone tells me you are ready. My name may not mean much to you yet, but I assure you it will. I am not just the old man you helped at the station. My life has been long, filled with battles and blessings, and I have built something I cannot leave to just anyone. I have been searching for someone with character, someone who sees people and not just faces in the crowd. When you stopped for me, you showed me you are that person. Maya's hands shook as her eyes darted over the words. She could hardly breathe. What I offer you is more than money or power. It is a chance. Enclosed with this letter is a card with an address. Meet me there this weekend. Do not be afraid. Your life is about to change. Maya flipped the page, but there was no signature, only the address written clearly at the bottom. She quickly looked back at the envelope. Empty. No money, no hidden catch. Just a letter, cryptic but sincere. Her heart pounded with a mix of fear and anticipation. She wasn't the kind of person who trusted easily, especially with something that sounded too much like a fairy tale. Yet something deep inside urged her forward. She remembered his eyes, the way he had looked at her, as though he saw straight into her soul. The weekend arrived slowly, each day dragging under the weight of uncertainty. When Saturday morning finally came, Maya found herself standing outside the address written on the card. Her breath caught in her throat as she looked up. Before her loomed a grand building, not an office or apartment, but a sprawling estate surrounded by towering iron gates. This can't be right, she whispered to herself, clutching the letter tighter. Yet the numbers matched. The gate opened automatically, as though expecting her. Heart racing, she walked up the long driveway until the mansion's front doors came into view. They swung open before she could knock. And there he was, Walter. But gone was the frail old man in a worn coat. This Walter stood tall, dressed sharply in a tailored suit, his cane now more a symbol of dignity than necessity. Maya, he greeted warmly, his smile both familiar and unsettling. I'm glad you came. Her eyes widened, words tumbling clumsily from her lips. What is all of this? Walter motioned her inside. The interior of the mansion was breathtaking, marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and walls lined with paintings that spoke of centuries of history. Maya had never set foot in such luxury, and it left her dizzy. Sit, Walter said gently, guiding her into a plush chair in his grand study. He poured tea, his movements deliberate, as though he had done this 1,000 times before. Finally, he met her gaze. You must have questions. That's an understatement, Maya replied, trying to steady her voice. Who are you, really? Walter leaned back, his expression serious now. My name is Walter Hamilton. I am the founder of Hamilton and Company, one of the largest investment firms in the city. I have wealth, influence, and more than my share of enemies. But what I don't have is someone I can trust to carry forward what truly matters. Maya's eyes widened. Why me? You barely know me. Walter smiled knowingly. But I do. You showed me who you are when you stopped at that train station. I've spent years watching people chase after money, power, and status. But you gave up your train, your punctuality, maybe even your job, just to help a man no one else would even look at. That tells me more about you than any resume or reference ever could. Maya's heart pounded. This felt unreal, like something out of a movie. So what do you want from me? I want to give you an opportunity, Walter said firmly. Not charity, not a handout, but a chance to step into a life where your compassion and strength can create real change. I have the resources. You have the heart. Together, we can build something far greater than either of us alone. Silence filled the room as Maya tried to process his words. She thought of her struggles at the law firm, the constant fight for recognition, and the exhaustion of climbing uphill with no end in sight. And now, sitting before her, was a man offering her something she could not yet define but which felt larger than life. Her voice trembled as she spoke. I don't know if I'm ready for this. Walter leaned forward, his eyes steady. No one ever is. But I believe in you, and one day you'll believe in yourself the way I do. Maya's chest tightened with emotion. For the first time in a long time, she felt seen, not as a worker, not as an outsider, but as someone with value, someone worthy of trust. She left the mansion that evening with her mind spinning. Her life, once predictable, had cracked open into something unknown. The weight of the envelope, the mystery of Walter's true identity, the offer that now hung in the air, it was overwhelming. But beneath it all, a spark of hope flickered. Perhaps missing her train had not been a setback at all. Perhaps it had been the first step onto a new path. And though she didn't know it yet, this path would soon test her courage, her dignity, and her very sense of self in ways she could never have imagined. The following week felt surreal for Maya. Every routine moment, waking up to the buzzing alarm, walking through the noisy subway station, sitting at her cramped office desk, was now shadowed by the memory of Walter's mansion, his words echoing in her ears. You have the heart. Together, we can build something far greater. At the law firm, Mr. Kendall was as sharp and dismissive as ever. He scolded her for being too soft in a client meeting, accusing her of lacking the ruthlessness needed for corporate law. The words stung, but this time they did not cut as deeply. For the first time, Maya realized she no longer needed his approval to define her worth. That evening, she returned to Walter's estate. He greeted her warmly, as though she had always belonged there. The two spent hours walking through his vast library, walls lined with books on history, philosophy, civil rights, and finance. Walter spoke of the battles he had fought, not only in boardrooms, but in the streets, as a black man building wealth in a world determined to shut him out. I started with nothing, he told her, his voice steady. I worked jobs where I was paid half of what others earned, fought lawsuits designed to strip me of everything, and faced doors slammed in my face simply because of the color of my skin. But I kept building, brick by brick. And now I stand here, not just for myself, but for those who will come after. Maya listened in awe. Walter's life was a testament to resilience, a mirror of the same struggles she carried every day, yet magnified across decades of injustice. Why tell me all this? She asked softly. Because you need to understand what you're stepping into, Walter replied. Wealth without purpose is hollow. Influence without integrity is poison. But when you combine resources with compassion, that is when real change begins. Over the weeks that followed, Maya's visit became frequent. Walter introduced her to his trusted circle of advisors, many of them older men and women who had stood by him through storms of discrimination and betrayal. At first, they regarded her with suspicion, another young outsider, unproven. But as they saw her humility, her willingness to learn, and the quiet fire in her spirit, they began to accept her. One evening, Walter handed her a leather-bound journal. This, he said, is my life's record. Every triumph, every mistake, every lesson. I want you to read it. And when you do, I want you to add your own pages. Because my story cannot end with me. It must continue with you. Maya's hands trembled as she accepted the journal. She spent nights poring over its pages, tracing Walter's journey from poverty to power. She read of betrayals by people he trusted, victories won against impossible odds, and the relentless faith that had carried him through. Each page was both a wound and a testament to survival. But even as a bond with Walter deepened, doubts gnawed at her. Who was she to carry such a legacy? She was just Maya, an overworked associate at a law firm where her efforts went unnoticed, a young woman whose voice was often drowned out. Could she truly rise to what Walter saw in her? The answer came sooner than she expected. One rainy evening, Walter collapsed during a board meeting. The mansion was thrown into chaos. Doctors rushed in, staff whispered nervously, and Maya found herself at his bedside, holding his frail hand. His eyes fluttered open, weak but steady. "Maya," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "It's time." Tears welled in her eyes. "Don't say that. You're going to be fine." He gave a faint smile. "We both know better. I've lived long enough. But you are just beginning. Promise me, Maya. Promise me you won't let fear stop you. Promise me you'll fight, not just for yourself, but for those who come after." Her throat tightened. "I promise." Walter closed his eyes, a peaceful expression settling over his face. And with that, the man who had missed his train only to meet her on a fateful day, the man who had changed the trajectory of her life, slipped quietly into rest. Maya wept. The loss was unbearable, yet beneath her grief was a burning resolve. She remembered his words, "Wealth without purpose is hollow. Influence without integrity is poison." In the weeks that followed, Maya learnt the full extent of Walter's intentions. His will named her as a successor to his foundation, a vast network of resources dedicated to uplifting black communities, funding education, supporting small businesses, and fighting systemic injustice. Many were shocked. Critics called her unqualified and opportunistic. But those who had seen her dedication stood firmly by her side. The first time she stood before the Foundation's board, Maya felt her knees tremble. But as she began to speak, something shifted. Her voice carried not just her own conviction, but also the weight of Walter's legacy, her mother's sacrifices, and the countless stories of those who had been silenced or overlooked. "We cannot measure success by wealth alone," she said firmly, her eyes meeting the skeptical faces in the room. "We must measure it by how many lives we lift, how many doors we open, and how much dignity we restore to those the world tries to erase." That is what Walter believed. That is what I believe. And that is the path forward. Silence filled the room. And then, slowly, heads began to nod. The battle ahead would not be easy. She knew that. But for the first time, Maya felt ready. Months later, standing on the steps of a newly opened community center funded by Walter's Foundation, Maya looked out at the crowd. Children laughed, parents smiled with relief, and elders watched with pride. A reporter asked her how she had come to this place of leadership. Maya paused, emotion swelling in her chest. She thought of that missed train, of Walter's weary figure struggling on the platform, of the moment her choice to stop had altered everything. "I missed a train once," she said softly into the microphone, "but I gained a purpose." Sometimes, life makes us late for where we think we're supposed to be, because it's guiding us exactly where we're meant to go. The crowd erupted in applause. Tears glistened in her eyes as she lifted her face to the sky, whispering a silent thank you to Walter, to her mother, to every struggle that had shaped her. And in that moment, Maya understood the truth of Walter's words. Kindness is never wasted. A single choice, a single act of dignity, can ripple outward and change not only one life but generations to come. Her story had only just begun.